Today's lesson is going to review some of the key information that we have gone over about writing with research, and it's going to focus specifically about using research within a paragraph to show how this connects your main idea to the evidence. So this lesson will go over a very brief review or reminder about paraphrasing and quoting. We'll talk about when to quote and when to paraphrase, how to incorporate evidence as support. We will have a little bit of a review about what doesn't need to be cited, and then just a very brief review of some important things with polishing your writing. So as a reminder, quoting and paraphrasing, and mixed with paraphrasing would also be summarizing. But quoting, paraphrasing, and summarizing are ways that you incorporate evidence into your writing, and you have a citation which gives credit to the original author of those words or ideas. But quoting is when you're using the exact words as they appeared in the original, and so you have quotation marks around that, and you would include a page number. With a paraphrase and with a summary as well, you're not taking the exact words, but you're changing the structure of the sentences. You're using different vocabulary to keep the meaning the same as the original, but just to rewrite it in your own writing. And when you do this, you need your citation, but you do not put in a page number. In terms of when you should use a quote and when you should use a paraphrase, this is a little bit of review from a previous lesson where we talked about how quotes should be used sparingly. And if you're able to put the information into a paraphrase, then that's what you should do. But quoting can be helpful if you're trying to include a specific wording of something like a definition, or if you're trying to paraphrase and you just can't do it without changing enough, so it's going to look too similar to the original, then perhaps a quote might be more effective. It could also be helpful if you're trying to include specific information like statistics, and perhaps the wording, it's just too difficult to change. So keeping it as the original in a quote might be best. Whereas a paraphrase would be if you take an original author's ideas, but you put it into your own words, or if you are summarizing information from several sections of a source and you're condensing that into maybe one or two sentences, then this is where summarizing and paraphrasing is useful. Some important things to remember about quotes is that you must use quotation marks around the part of the text that is taken from the other source. And you need to have your in-text citation, which would have your author's last name, the year, and the page number the quote appears on. If you're using a narrative citation, then the page number should appear at the end of the sentence. If you're using a parenthetical, then all the citation information would be in the same parentheses at the end of the sentence. And then with paraphrases, you do not use quotation marks and you do not use page numbers or a paragraph number. Because the writing is your own, you're just taking the ideas. You only include the citation with the author's name and the year. But you have to make sure that you're changing enough of the original to make it your own. So not only just changing one or two words, but everything needs to be changed while also maintaining the original meaning. When you're going to incorporate evidence as part of your writing, you do this as a way of supporting your ideas. So this is really important because you need to make sure that your evidence is supporting your argument, not trying to make your argument for you. So your evidence is there to prove your main idea, prove the point you're trying to take. So your main idea should be the position that you are taking on your topic, or it might be the answer to a research question. So you need to take a position, and then you would provide reasons as to why that is your position, and your reasons should include evidence in the form of citations. So this is where you would possibly use quotations, paraphrases, or summaries. So you want to ask yourself some questions when you are including evidence. So you state your point, you introduce some evidence, then you have to make sure that you're explaining it. So ask yourself, why is that piece of evidence interesting? Why is that quote or that paraphrase or that idea interesting or important? Why should the person reading this care? So it's something that you need to, if you're putting this evidence in, there's a reason. What is the reason that you're choosing that particular evidence? So other things you want to think about is, how is this related to my thesis? What is the connection between this evidence and my supporting points and my overall thesis, if this is part of an essay? Sometimes you may want to give examples to illustrate a point that is made within the evidence, and that is something that you may also do as a way of explaining your evidence. When you are trying to incorporate evidence, some things you might want to think about is how to incorporate this and what you could possibly do with this evidence. So if this is part of an essay, you would have your thesis statement. If this is a paragraph, you'd have your topic sentence. And that's where you state your main idea for that writing. So within a paragraph, your topic sentence has the main idea, and then all the rest of the sentences are there to support the main idea. And this is through evidence. Okay, so you could incorporate evidence in a few different ways. You could present evidence that agrees with your main idea, and then you add to that with your own ideas or your own explanation. You could include evidence that contradicts your stance, and then you want to spend your voice arguing against it to strengthen your position. So providing examples or explanation of why that is wrong. But you want to make sure that you're not just using quotes or paraphrases to restate your point. You need to have your point, and then your evidence is there for support, to show examples, further explanation, to show maybe historical evidence over time. So your point and your evidence are not just repeats of the same thing. When you are writing, it's really important to make sure that you review your writing for things like your grammar, your sentence structure, and punctuation. So earlier in the term, there were some lessons on the 4 sentence types and a lesson on sentence errors and punctuation rules. So make sure that you take a look at those to check for things like run-on sentences, that you're using semicolons appropriately. If you're using different types of sentences, make sure that you are joining your clauses appropriately. Make sure that you have different types of sentences. Then when it comes to grammar, a few things that you always want to check would be subject-verb agreement. So does the verb agree or does it match your subject? So that would be things like saying the author argues. So a singular subject, the author, should have a singular verb agreement, argues. Whereas if it's multiple authors, the authors argue, okay, with a plural agreement. You also want to make sure that you don't write the way you speak. So make sure that every sentence is complete and not just a run-on of several thoughts in one sentence. Similarly, you do not want to write sentence fragments, which would be incomplete sentences. And make sure that you are consistent with your verb tense. Generally, when you're writing a research document like an essay or a research paragraph, you would write in the simple present tense. And always check for plurals or with singular nouns. Check for your article usage, check for capitals and punctuation, both end punctuation like periods, but also things like commas and semicolons.